Hey folks, I'm Jax, and I'm going to today run through some of the changes that are coming in 9.15 to Blood Death Knights, and I actually have to step back and give a bit of a shout out to the community. I know I am typically maining my prop pal and pushing that tune through a bunch of random pugs, and I actually came across a fair bit of content just continuing to say like, yo, stick with Blood DK, it's worth checking out, and I have to be honest. It is so much fun to just absolutely control mobs with Gorfine's Grasp. I totally forget about how satisfying it is just to grip every mob that's in front of you and be able to drop some serious AoE damage on them. So, with that being said, let's talk really quick about what's changing here with 9.15. What Blizzard's doing actually to start is they're removing the target cap. So Abomination Limb used to be target capped. That's no longer the case. It's going to deal full damage up to the first 5 opponents it hits, and then it'll be a soft cap or reduced damage after that 5. Sacrificial Pact, Consumption, and Bone Storm are also no longer target capped, but they start to do reduced damage beyond 8 targets overall. So that's still pretty amazing from a throughput perspective. Shackle the Unworthy, which is like the Kyrian Death Knight Covenant ability, it's had its damage reduced by 10%, but don't panic. It actually has a 100% chance now to sprint to nearby enemies. It used to only be 50%. So we're trying to buff Kyrian here a little bit, get them on board. Withering Ground, which is a Night Fae Conduit, and Impenetrable Gloom, both have had their effects increased by 50%, so trying to make each spec a little bit more attractive because Necrolord and Death Knights are just going hand in hand, just across all specs. A fun one, Consumption, which is one of our tier 2 abilities right here. That's actually received a 60% damage buff, which is really interesting because Hemostasis was holding this down exclusively for a really long time. So look to see what your new damage is looking like here and look for what the heal component of this as well. It's definitely might be worth incorporating into 9.15 and onward. So let's jump right into the talents. I know that's why people are here. Tier 1, you're going to stick with Heartbreaker. Basically, Heartstrike generating 2 additional runic power per target hit starts to make a huge difference because we're going to take huge pulls. We're at the midpoint, if not later in the expansion. It's not time to pull cautiously anymore. Get the big mobs out there with you. Tier 2, Hemostasis, like we mentioned. Each enemy hit by Blood Boil increases the damage and healing done by your next Death Strike by up to 8%, stacking up to 5 times. That only benefits from a big boy pull, so keep that going. Look at Consumption. That's attractive. You get to plow 8 enemies, but let's step back and say like, you're probably going to plow 8 enemies with Hemostasis as well. So let's think through what that looks like, and maybe Death Strike can start to be used a little bit more offensively, or more offensively than it has been. Tier 3, Relish in Blood or Blood Tap are both credible options here. So we'll touch on the differences really quick. Blood Tap is basically an active ability with 2 charges if you're not familiar with it. The ability is off the global cooldown and you regenerate the rune with the longest amount of time left. So overall it's not too bad, but you do lose a stack of Bone Shield when Blood Tap has its cooldown reduced by 2 seconds. So I don't know if it's necessarily there. What I think you should do is start off with Relish in Blood if you're new to the spec. Get comfortable with this, like it is a very easy passive approach, and then transition over to Blood Tap once your competency and comfort with the spec builds up. Tier 4, Will of the Necropolis continues to be the default choice here. It's basically the most reliable amount of damage reduction. Having more uptime on your anti-magic barrier can have some uses if you think that there's like some massive magical tank busters out there, but you've already got your anti-magic zone. You should have your bone shield up a little bit, You should have your Icebound Fortitude. Like, you've got a few different ways here between Vampiric Blood, Rune Tap, Lichborn. Like, there's a lot of options here. Fleshcraft. Like, our survivability and ability to take a huge beating should actually be really, really high. So I'm not as sold on the anti-magic barrier, but I am on board with the Will of the Necropolis. Just basically reducing any kind of damage throughput we have makes a really nice difference. It's kind of an additional safety net for us. So I'd stick with that personally. Tier 5, we've got the choice. Grip of the Dead. That's kind of the recommendation there. It basically puts a 90% slow on enemies whenever they enter your death and decay, and the slow decays by 10% every second over its duration. So drop your death and decay down and start kiting and get, whether it's the melee or the range, to start nuking down whoever it is, because after about 5 seconds the mobs will be starting to close up on you once again. I won't touch Wraithwalk specifically for me. Like on this tune, I've gone Worgen with this in mind, that I don't want to have that choice, and I want to be able to take advantage of one of these other utilities. That was the driver for being a Wolfman. Tier 6, you've actually got a couple of choices. Death Pact is not one of them. Avoid this at all costs. Having a 50% heal on you feels great until you're looking at like a 30% stunt in terms of income and healing. That's terrible. Bloodworms works actually really well. So cool. Want to start to build up to about 15% of your missing health. And if you drop below 50% health, the bloodworms just pop and start to top you back up. That's great. Alternatively, Voracious. It takes Death Strike's healing and increases it by 20%. Grants you 15% leech for 8 seconds. Yeah, right? When we start to look back at like, how can we incorporate this a little bit? Hemostasis and Voracious could work together quite well. So keep that in mind. Finally, Tier 7 is a bit of a fun one. Usually most specs have like a very prescriptive, like this is your go-to cooldown. But Blood's a little different. Bone Storm definitely gives us some of the best damage, basically being able to nuke 8 nearby enemies and start laying some serious damage on them, as well as healing you. That's pretty attractive. Red Thirst, basically reducing the cooldown of Vampiric Blood by 1.5 seconds. That's also attractive. Hey, it's a cheat death effectively. When you're increasing your max health by 30 and increasing all healing and absorbs received by 30, that's pretty darn attractive. If we can get that up more often, we would take it. But really, where I want us to start is with the old cheat death. So Purgatory is an unholy pact that prevents fatal damage, instead absorbing incoming healing equal to the damage prevented, and it lasts 3 seconds. So if any healing absorption remains when the effect expires, you die. But it basically says that if there's like a tank buster coming in, it doesn't matter if we're talking Mythic plus, rating, wherever, and it drops the hammer on us, as long as our healer can top us back up enough to clear that absorb shield, then we're going to stay in this thing. It allows Blood Death Knights to push content that is way outside their eye level. So certainly worth checking out. From a Covenant perspective, all 4 Covenants are actually viable. Shackle the Unworthy, now that it's getting a bit of a rebuild, is a pretty solid choice for Blood Death Knights. Necrolord's Abomination Limb, like, that's a ton of fun if you like to chuckle to yourself at all the times these little slappy hands are on the go. Swarming Mist, which is the Venthyr ability, is kind of like an empowered Bone Storm. But the difference is that like Bone Storm costs runic power to use, and Swarming Mist generates runic power. So if you're going to play like Mythic Plus exclusively, then this would probably be like your one go-to choice for you. But if you're looking to play Frost and Unholy like me, hey, take advantage of the pending changes here and swap freely in between the different covenants. Now, in terms of different legendaries, let's jump to the good stuff now. If I didn't just close my note. Let's jump to legendaries now. Crimson Rune Weapon is your actual go-to for Mythic Plus. Basically, any fights you have high tanking uptime, this is going to be where you're going to really benefit defensively from that legendary. So you want to pick that one up early and get it locked up right away. It does drop from our dungeons, so you've got nothing to worry about. You don't need to go push old raids or anything like that. And overall, I think the spec is in a great spot. So yeah, Blood Death Knights, not super attractive because they're slow and they don't line up with the kiting meta, but they're super tanky. They've got more defensives than we know what to do with, to the point where they're almost overlapping, and they're just a ton of fun to play with. I fully recommend them, folks. Definitely take some time to familiarize yourself with them, and most importantly, have fun. Alright, let me know your thoughts down in the comments about this 9.15 changes, and let me know what I can do different in the video. Thanks for watching. Peace.